going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Head First Project, where it's all about attacking life head first. Thank you for listening. I am your host, Nate Hoffman. Today is Saturday Stew. Today is November 21st, 2020. Saturday Stew is where we talk about a fitness topic in depth and stew over the science behind it to get a better understanding as to how and why things happen in our body so we can use that to make our training better. Today's topic is main muscle training methods. Before we get into it, I'm playing with my audio settings a lot. I changed some stuff with my microphone and on the mixer that I'm using to record this. Hopefully the audio comes across a lot more crisp and clear for you guys. Whenever I put the episodes together, I do my best to edit everything. I edit all the background noise out and the sounds of me breathing and doing weird shit as I'm trying to record these. Hopefully this makes it a little bit better than they have been before. Today's information from behind the project comes from the NSCA's textbook, Strength Training. This is the second edition of the book. You can get this new on Amazon for $22, or you can find it used online for about $10. This is a really good book if you don't want to commit to a large, expensive textbook on strength training. It's a really good starter book, I guess you could call it, to get into stuff. It's about 400 pages, a little bit less than that. It talks about everything from muscle development, equipment, assessment, exercise, technique, programming, and nutrition. So if you want a really well-rounded base to learn stuff, getting into strength training, personal training, anything like that, this is a great book to pick up. It's relatively inexpensive, and it's got a lot of really good information in it. I'm going to start a running Google document that I'm going to put all the links to the textbooks that I use on the show on here, so that way you guys can check it out if you want to find any of the books to maybe buy them. And then I'm going to also put links in the descriptions of each YouTube video for the book that I use in that exact episode. Let's get right into it. I'm sure most of you listening already know, but for those of you who don't, our muscles respond different ways to different types of training. Depending on how you go about your training and the intensity you use, the reps you use, the rest time you use, and everything like that, your body is going to respond differently and get better at those things that you're training. There's basically 4 blanket goals that you look at whenever you're doing strength training. These are going to be maximum strength, power, endurance, and hypertrophy. Maximum strength is exactly what it sounds like. It's moving as much weight as you possibly can in one go. You see this in powerlifting whenever powerlifters do bench, squat, and deadlift in their competitions. They take their attempts and try to move as much weight as they possibly can. Next, we have power. Power is largely seen in Olympic weightlifting. It's moving as much weight as you can, as fast as you possibly can. That's how you generate the power to get these weights moving, is by doing it very quickly. Unlike powerlifting, that is kind of a slow, grindy rep that's getting as much as you possibly can, pushing to that 100%. Power, if you look at Olympic weightlifting, it happens really, really, really fast. To look at it from a physics standpoint, the equation for power is work over change in time. Work is force times displacement. So force is going to be mass, which is the weight you're lifting, times acceleration, and displacement is going to be a linear measurement of how much that weight moves in space. That's why it's all about moving weight quickly. When you look at the equation, it has acceleration in there. Velocity is the speed at which an object is moving constantly. Acceleration is increasing velocity. Whenever you do these movements, it's all about taking that weight and increasing its velocity to move it as fast as possible while you perform the movement. When you expand the formula and look at the whole picture without simplifying it all, power is going to be equal to mass times acceleration times displacement over change in time. Next, we have endurance. Endurance is pretty self-explanatory. It is doing things over and over and over again for a long time and enduring that amount of time doing that activity. This is a game of efficiency. It's long-distance stuff like cross-country, biking, rowing, sports that take a long time to do the event. And lastly, probably arguably the most popular in strength training is hypertrophy. This is exercising to gain size of the muscle. So whenever you start to look at training, you need to know that different people have different affinities to different methods, and that goes beyond people preferring things. I'm not a endurance athlete. I do not like running for long periods of time. I do not like doing any sort of cardio like that for a really long period of time. So that it comes down to a personal preference, what people like. They're going to stick to what they like to train, but it also comes into their event. If you're a power lifter and you're trying to deadlift 800 pounds, you're not going to go run 10 miles a day like a cross-country runner would. It doesn't make any sense. And then also you have genetic affinities to training. If you have a big guy that weighs like 250 pounds from not training much, he's just naturally a big dude, his body is going to have a preference to things like hypertrophy and power and max strength, but he's going to be terrible in endurance running. The same thing can be said for a person that is 130 pounds. If you put them on a track or put them into a cross-country race or on a bicycle, they are probably going to be able to go all day long. But if you put them under a 400-pound squat, they're going to collapse to the floor more than likely, and they're not going to be as good as that 250-pound guy at training something like that just because of the way their body is. There's different body types, and your body is going to prefer and be genetically better at one thing. You can train for anything and improve at it, but certain body types are only going to be so good at certain types of training, and you will be able to improve, but if you are genetically predisposed to being really good in one sort of category, you're kind of going to lean towards that category no matter what. First of all, let's talk about strength training. Strength training, also called max strength, is how much weight can you move in a single effort. I mentioned powerlifting. This is the most common display of it. How much weight can you move in one single effort? This is done in competitions for squat, bench, deadlift, and then, a lot of other people, they test their maxes all the time for overhead press, leg press, whatever you can really imagine. Someone's probably tested their max strength on it, and people even do bicep curls and all that. But that's really a lot less common and doesn't count as much as the big three that you see in competitions. This sort of training is focused around using your 1 rep max and weights close to it. So whenever you program for this, you want to ahead of time test your maxes and figure out what your 1 rep max is for each event. And then whenever you do your training and you program for it, typically you're going to base your sets off of percentages of that weight. So to use easy numbers, if my max bench press is 200 pounds, whenever I'm training, I would probably do sets of increasing intensity relative to that. So I would have a set of, say, 60% of my 1 rep max, so that'd be 120 pounds. I'd have sets of 70% of my 1 rep max, so that'd be 140 pounds, and so on. And because of the high load in strength training, you can't do as many reps because your body is just going to be absolutely exhausted from putting forth all this effort. The sets in strength training are almost always 5 reps or less. If you're doing more than 5 reps in a set, you pretty much have branched out from strength training, and that's not really what you're working on anymore. Because these sets are so demanding on your body, they require huge rest periods. You need to let your body recover from putting forth all of that effort because it's going to be super taxing on your energy systems, your nervous system. Your nervous system is going to be recruiting so many neurons and firing just crazy, and your muscles are going to be taking a real beating from this. So whenever you do these sets, you need to wait 2 to 5 or maybe even more minutes in between each set. That way your body can fully recover before you start the next one. Beyond using percentages of your 1 rep max in training, your whole idea behind strength training for getting your max is based around the specific overload principle. What the specific overload principle is essentially gradually increasing the load on your muscles during training to force them to adapt to that level. If your 1 rep max is 200 pounds, you would be training at percentages close to that, leading up to like 90-95% of that 1 rep max to get as close to it as possible, and then you would eventually start working with that max and then beyond that over time. And then that max that you established before is going to increase because you're putting similar strain on your body all the time, and it's going to adapt to that to get better at it, and then eventually you will be able to push more weight. Most books and high-level publications that have researched strength training in depth say that 80 to 100% of your 1 rep max is going to be the most efficient weight load that you can use in training to get better at this. Obviously, you don't want to train with 30 or 40% of your 1 rep max because that's going to be super easy and you're not really going to make any progress with that. There's a guy by the name of Mark Peterson. He conducted and published a study called Maximizing Strength Development in Athletes, a meta-analysis to determine the dose-response relationship. This was done in 2004, and it goes way into the percentage proportions of your 1 rep max to get the best results out of strength training, and their conclusions found out that doing sets at around 85% for most of your training is slick. It is the way to go. It was super effective in the athletes that they tested during this study. So if you hang around that 85% range whenever you're doing your training, you're going to have really good results over time. So if you're new to fitness, you don't want to go into the gym and start tossing around your max weight every single session. You need to do volume, volume, volume. You need to get your muscles accustomed to training like this and get the technique down and get them used to training at a higher level than just sitting around. Then you can get into the higher weights. You need to practice what you're doing to get good at it. So if you get under these real high weights and start pushing them around, chances are you're going to injure yourself if you, one, don't have the technique, two, your body hasn't had a chance to adapt to it at all, and three, you just straight up aren't prepared to handle those weights at all. Also, like I said, that's why you need the high rest times of like 2 to 5 minutes between each set, because it's so taxing on your nervous system and your muscles. If you go in the gym every single workout and you're maxing out trying to hit these huge PRs and 1 rep maxes on every training session, you're going to be overtraining. You're going to be going in reverse. Your body's just going to have way too much strain on it, and you're not going to be able to recover proportionately to the load that you're putting on your body. Next, we have power. As I explained with the formula, it is strength over time. It is about being as strong as possible, as quick as possible. You want to be strong and fast. Typically, the end goal in a power movement is moving as much weight as you possibly can very quickly and with good technique, because if you don't have good technique, you're just going to be muscle fucking these weights around and you're going to end up getting hurt. I'm sure you've all seen on Instagram or YouTube, wherever you watch stuff, of people trying to do, a lot of CrossFit people end up doing this. They'll try to do these big power movements like power cleans or snatches and stuff like that. And maybe their technique's not there. Maybe the weight's a little bit too high for them. And they're banging these weights around. And then next thing you know, they're folded up on the floor under a barbell. Power training is as much about getting the technique down and perfecting it. And a lot of that goes into the timing, far beyond, just how you orient your body and move your body throughout the movement, but the timing and the way you do things. You need to practice this technique as much as possible before you can really get into these heavy weights and start throwing them around efficiently and safely. Very similar to strength training for max strength, it's another low volume training method that isn't done in super high sets normally. There's research out there that says that lower loads in power training, like 30 to 60% of your 1 rep max, but still in low volumes of 3 to 6 reps per set, are really, really, really good at developing power. This was found in a study by Jeffrey McBride. They conducted and published this study, the effect of heavy versus light load jump squats on the development of strength, power, and speed. This was done in 2002, so basically they looked into specifically jump squats and loaded jump squats to determine how much of a load they needed to get the best response out of the athletes in the study. So when it comes to developing power, you want to keep your reps a little bit lower in your sets, somewhere between 3 and 6, and you don't always want to go super heavy like you would think. You would think doing higher weights would get you stronger and get you better at it, but the numbers came back to support that 30 to 60% of your 1 rep max was perfect, because at that point you have a little bit of weight to throw around, but your body is also going to be able to handle that really efficiently, so your technique is going to take over the majority of the lift at that point. If it's, less than half of your 1 rep max, your muscles aren't going to be exerting themselves fully. You're not going to be destroying yourself, really struggling with these weights, but it's going to come to the point where you can be super snappy, super fast, and just hammer on that technique to get it perfectly. And then once you have that good base developed, you're going to be able to push higher and get those heavier weights to work on max strength in those lifts as you're progressing. This is going to be kind of a hybridized training method that's going to focus on speed and strength. Part of your accessory training beyond just the power movements that you're trying to work on. You want to work on just general speed and conditioning whenever it comes to doing cardio and other weightlifting movements. You want to be able to do it quick, and you also want to work on strength and bring the two together. That way, whenever you do your power events like the clean and jerk or the snatch, that you're going to be able to have that well-rounded base to do the strong movements very quickly. Next, we have endurance. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's being able to endure. It's doing something a lot over and over again for a long period of time. This can be weightlifting, body weight exercises like push-ups and sit-ups. It can be cardiovascular endurance like rowing, biking, anything like that. And the whole idea behind this is if you want to get good at it, you got to do a lot of it. To train for endurance, you're going to be doing very high rep sets. When it comes to weightlifting or body weight exercises to get better at that, you're going to be doing 15 to 25, sometimes even more reps per set. And a lot of the time you see people whenever they're doing this endurance training is they won't even count their reps per set, but whenever they train on a time basis. This is the most popular with CrossFit training. You see people, instead of putting what I'm really used to and what I prefer to do, putting, 4 sets of 10 reps on my workout schedule. They'll put 3 minutes or 2 minutes, as many reps as possible in this one exercise. So instead of binding yourself to, I need to get 15 reps, I need to get 20 reps, and you're just working for that, it really puts a different perspective on things. So in that amount of time, you're doing as much as you possibly can, and you're not kind of gearing yourself in your head to maybe slow yourself down or push yourself quickly to get that 15, 20 reps down, whatever you have planned. Endurance training is typically going to be done in 2 to 3 or sometimes more sets. 2 to 3 is the real good baseline. You could do more if you're a little bit more developed and advanced, but typically you're going to stay in that 2 to 3 set range just because of how much of a load you're going to be putting on your body with those really, really high reps per set. Your rest time in between sets is going to be really low since it's not going to be a super high intensity. You're not going to be using a big weight to do 20 reps of an exercise. So whenever you're finished with doing that set of the exercise, you aren't going to be super fatigued in terms of the demand you put on your muscles through intensity. So you're going to be able to keep your rest times low. These are going to be under a minute. A lot of people go 30 seconds or less because that's going to force your body to adapt to enduring more. If you don't give it rest time to recover those energy stores and let your muscles recover, you're going to have to adapt to being better at doing that event for longer. You can do endurance training specifically in endurance athletes, obviously, to get them better at the event that you're doing, but it's really good for just beginning trainers that have never really done any weightlifting or strength training before. Like I mentioned with power or max strength, you want to get that technique down before you really get into the heavy weights. So if you have a person or yourself that's just new to strength training and starting out, you need to develop that conditioning in your body so your muscles are used to what you're doing. You need to get that technique base down before you start slamming those huge weights around and just banging stuff around and putting yourself at risk for injury. You have to do a lot of that movement. That way you're comfortable for it, you know how to do it, and you get your body conditioned to where you need to be. And it's just a really good way to kick off a fitness program and get someone in shape from if they are a sedentary person and they don't really work out a whole lot. Doing this sort of endurance training with weights or body weight exercises or even cardio is really going to get their fitness kicked up from what the point that they're at right now before you get them into a more advanced program. And that's what's nice too. If someone's not super conditioned, you're not going to be putting high weights on them and they're going to be getting their ass kicked every single set. But since it's low rest, high rep, low weight, they're going to be active the whole time. They're going to be busy because they're not resting a whole lot. It's high reps, so they're going to be engaged. They're going to be developing that technique. They're going to be getting a good workout. And it's going to be low weight since they're doing those high reps and they're new and they're doing so much at once. Obviously, you can't have a lot of weight. It's great for people that aren't really established in strength training to get them off the ground. Endurance training is just all about taking the weight or taking the machine, your bike or whatever you're on, and just grinding it out for a long time. It's monotonous. It will get you good progress over time, whether you're an endurance athlete or just trying to build a basis in fitness. You just got to put the time in. Also for new people, since it's low weight, it's going to be generally safe. You're not going to be banging around these huge weights trying to set PRs straight out of the gate. It's not going to be a weight that's going to be particularly easy to hurt yourself with. I mean, anyone can get hurt at any time with any amount of weight, but the chances of injury are going to be far, far less using these smaller weights. Last but not least, and certainly my favorite overall, is hypertrophy. Hypertrophy training is super complex. It's really dense. There's so much to it. I'm just going to go over the basics of it right now. I would say that hypertrophy training has more to it than pretty much any other style of training just because of how much goes into it. If you're doing power or max strength, a lot of that is really going to determine on your technique or the loads that you're putting yourself under when you're training. But when you train for hypertrophy to get your muscles to grow, it's so much more than just what you're doing in the gym. You know, you have to be super disciplined with your nutrition, your recovery. It really affects your lifestyle, how you live, how you function, how you plan your meals and all that sort of stuff. I think it just has a lot more to it than other training styles, and I'm probably going to do a podcast that's really in depth on hypertrophy just because of how popular it is. Everyone wants to gain muscle and get bigger and get in better shape and look better, so I'm going to take an episode and go more in depth in this and really talk about all the aspects of it. I might not do an episode directly on hypertrophy, but the summation of all the different little parts that I put out in other podcasts will definitely talk about all the aspects of hypertrophy and everything you need to know. That being said, the whole goal with hypertrophy is developing your muscles to increase size. With this, you're going to gain strength because you're doing strength training, and you're going to gain endurance because hypertrophy is a higher rep scheme of training than power or max strength training. Unless you focus on the other methods of training, you're not going to gain as much as you could. And the same can be said for hypertrophy from other training methods. Anyone that starts lifting weights, you're going to gain some muscle. You're going to start noticing the way you look. It's going to change. But unless you're focusing on training hypertrophy directly, planning everything you can in doing hypertrophy training, you are not going to experience the kind of hypertrophy you would if you were doing hypertrophy training for hypertrophy's sake. How many times can I say hypertrophy in a couple of minutes? So when you're training hypertrophy, it's done with mid to high range intensity weights. This is going to be in the 50 to 90% range, and your rep schemes are going to be a little bit higher than strength training, but it's going to be lower than endurance training. The most widely accepted rep range for training hypertrophy is 6 to 15 reps. Some people say 12. I disagree with that. I think 15 is the top end that I would call hypertrophy per se. You're also going to perform a lot more sets with hypertrophy. This is going to be 3 to 6 sets per exercise or even more. And it's also going to be low rest time, like similar to endurance, because you want to get the most out of training the muscle. When it comes to hypertrophy, time under tension is a really important aspect to efficient training. That's exactly what it sounds like. It's the amount of time you spend with your muscles under tension of a weight load. Whenever you're doing this training, you don't want to just grab the weights and hammer out your set as fast as possible and then just wait for the next set. That time under tension, not only do you achieve time under tension from doing more sets and more reps, but you can get that from doing slower reps as well. Whenever you do the slower reps, you're going to get more blood in your muscles, you're going to get a better contraction of your muscles, you're going to get better usage out of all of your muscle, and that's going to promote growth more than if you're just slopping the weights around and completing your sets just to get the numbers done. So that was just a big, really general overview of all the different training methods that you can use depending on the goals that you have in strength training. It's a lot to keep in mind, and it's good to know because whenever you're planning your training, you can add different variations in. Even if you're not an endurance athlete, you can add some endurance in. Or even if you are an endurance athlete, you can add some power in. That way you're really getting the most out of everything you're doing and developing to be the best that you can. You just really, whenever it comes down to planning or adjusting your training, a lot of you are already going to be pretty established in strength training and you know what you're doing, what your goals are, and how to train for that. But if you don't, if you're newer, you got to think about yourself. You have to think about what you want to do, what you want to get good at. If you want to be able to run a marathon, or if you want to get bigger to have more muscle mass and look better. You have to think about what you're good at. If you are a 300-pound guy, you're probably not going to be great at riding a bike for 50 miles, but you're going to be one hell of a power lifter. Same thing with girls. If you're a 5'2" girl that weighs 100 pounds, you're probably not going to be a world record power lifter like Steffi Cohen, but you may be able to ride that bike forever, or you might be really good at running or rowing, something like that. So just look at what your body is kind of predisposed to do and what you think you might be good at, and then go from there. That's not saying that you can't branch out and try these other things, but if you want to get the most out of what your body is geared to do, you can train towards those genetic affinities. If you are that big guy that might be good at powerlifting and you hate powerlifting and love endurance training, sure, do the endurance training. You just have to know that your body's only going to be able to adapt so much depending on what you are. If you are not built like a powerlifter, you're probably not going to be a world record breaking powerlifter. That's not to say you won't be a good powerlifter, but it's just something you got to keep in mind to keep from discouraging yourself over the longevity of your training. And pretty much every training program ever created is not solely endurance, not solely power, not solely max strength. It's going to be a blend of everything. You're never going to have a program. If you do, I personally think it's kind of a garbage program. You can't have that much tunnel vision in the direction you're going. You need to blend everything together to get the most you can out of your training and get to be a well-rounded, really developed person. If you maybe don't have these things in the training program you already have, consider adding them in to round yourself out a little bit. And then as you get experience over time and you get more developed and you understand your body more, you understand your training more, you get better technique, you're going to safely be able to move into more high intensity stuff. From the beginning, at least for a couple months if you're new to strength training, I would stick to high rep, low weight, more towards endurance or even a hypertrophy rep scheme, I would not hit these huge 75 plus percentages of your 1 rep max. Also, I would not try to calculate and test my 1 rep maxes that fast into training. If you are a person that is being trained by someone, or you are training someone and you bring in a brand new client or athlete, or they bring you in, and in your first couple sessions they have you testing your 1 rep maxes, you need to take your business elsewhere, because you are not at the point that is safe, that is intelligent, that is the right thing to do. You need to build that base with technique and get your body conditioned. So just go ahead, grind it out, hit some endurance training, whether it's weightlifting, body weight, cardio, endurance. Just get your foot in the door, and then after a couple months, you're going to see results no matter what, getting those beginner gains. After that, you can move into the more advanced stuff and really take things in the direction you want to go. Just don't be afraid to branch out and see what you're good at. Don't forget to check out the NSCA's book, Strength Training, the second edition. Like I said, it's averaged like $15 online. It's a good book. I'm going to have the Google Doc and the link to the book in the description so you can check this out. I'm going to plan future episodes to go into these training methods a little bit more in depth. That way you guys can learn more, and I'm going to talk more about a lot of stuff, most specifically probably power and hypertrophy, because these are really complex and have a lot behind them, and I really like both of them. Even as much as I hate endurance training, and I do enjoy max strength training. I did compete in a powerlifting meet before. It's just not exactly my cup of tea. If you guys do want to hear about that, I'd be happy to. Just let me know, ask some questions, give me some suggestions, and I'd be happy to make a podcast on these. Or even something smaller like an Instagram post. I could do a story or an Instagram, like a regular Instagram post, to talk more about these and give you guys some information. Thank you guys so much for listening to the episode. Please share this with anyone that you think might be interested in this or want to hear this. I can't tell you how much it would help me if you give this a like or a thumbs up on whatever platform you're listening to. If you subscribe and follow the page, that way I can get more traffic and get this exposed. That way I can grow the project. Please contact me directly. Give me your feedback, what you liked, what you didn't like, what you want to hear, any suggestions for future episodes, specific questions. You can find me on Instagram on my personal account at TheOnlyHoff. You can find the official Head First Project page on Instagram at Head First Project. You can also email me, headfirstproject@gmail.com, or get in touch with me on YouTube through the comments, but Instagram and email are going to be the best ways to reach out. Look out for the next episode coming on this Monday. That is going to be a Monday Massacre. We are going to talk about working for your knowledge. Thank you all once again, and remember, always attack life head first.